Hello and welcome. Today it's time for the monthly news roundup for June, and this month we once again have NetherSX2 with 2 new versions. I'll also be talking for the first time about thethnikkaman, the NES emulator that brings classic gameplay with a 3D look to retro games. We also saw ShadPS4 reach version 0.9, now achieving almost 10% of the compatibility list marked as playable. There's also a rumor involving the Xenia team potentially working with Microsoft. Plus, Flycast being pulled from Apple's platform due to community toxicity, a brand new version of PPSSPP, and finally, the Mario Kart 64 port for Windows, Linux, and macOS. Starting with thethnikkaman, for those who don't know, it's basically an emulator that adds 3D perspective to classic NES games. Right now, the easiest way to get it is by purchasing it on Steam. Unfortunately, there's no free version, and not all games are supported. For those that are, you can freely change the camera angle using the right stick. The emulator supports save states and includes pretty much all modern features. If you want to follow the project closely, I'll leave the Steam page in the description along with the downloads for the other projects mentioned in the video. Flycast is the latest emulator to be affected by community threats, but this time it wasn't the Android community, it came from iOS users. However, the Flycast developer wasn't as flexible as others and chose to avoid conflict in a very straightforward way, by discontinuing the emulator on that platform. If you go to GitHub or any official project channel, there's simply nothing related to iOS anymore. The reason was ongoing threats coming from the community. No further details were revealed, but if you were using iOS to emulate Dreamcast, that's one less project now, maybe the only one that supported Sega Naomi on that platform. Of course, you can still download old files and run the games, but don't expect any new updates. Now, a rumor that ended up being denied, involving the Xenia team, the Xbox 360 emulator. Just for context, about a month ago, Microsoft launched a tool called Retro Classics on Game Pass, featuring Activision games ranging from the Atari era all the way to the Super Nintendo. Microsoft had already expressed interest in having an official emulator for the original Xbox and also for the Xbox 360. Right now, only a few titles from those consoles are available. The rumor claimed that Microsoft had reached out to the Xenia team to develop an official Xbox 360 emulator, with full documentation and support for running on Xbox consoles, PC, and even via cloud gaming, requiring only a Game Pass subscription. This kind of thing has happened before, for example, in the case of Game Fusion, where GameSir hired an entire team from a project similar to Winlator. The rumor spread quickly, but it was denied on Xenia's official Discord, unless the original developers had signed some NDA. A few days later, an official message was posted in the project's Discord, where user Jabobs clarified that neither the Xenia team nor the Xenia Canary team is involved with Microsoft, and that the company is working on its own backward compatibility solution. To me, that message was clear enough to believe Xenia remains an independent project, even though progress is slow due to the small team. ShadPS4 has now reached version 0.9. Will the next one finally be 1.0, a proper final release? Among the highlights, we had several improvements to the emulation core, changes to system libraries, better shader compilation, and GPU updates. In my opinion, this version already offers nearly flawless gameplay in Bloodborne, without needing many mods or fixes besides the usual patches. And yes, you might be wondering, did they bring back the pkg install method? And the answer is no. For that, you still need to use version 0.7 or the ShadPS4 Plus fork. Everything will be linked in the description to help you out. For those who don't know, ShadPS4 Plus is basically the same emulator, but with the install from menu option restored. The downside is that this fork can take 2 or 3 days to catch up with updates from the main branch. In terms of compatibility, we went from 28 to 32 games considered perfect, which is about 10% of the tested games. That might seem like a small number, but it's worth remembering that many PS4 games have already been released on PC. The crown jewel of this system is still Bloodborne. And what was already good got even better with the new update of PPSSPP, which has now reached version 1.19. Just as a reminder, the last version, 1.18, came out last year, so it's very likely that a lot has been added since then. Let's take a look at some of the changes. There were several improvements focused on the audio API, as well as on emulation and video. Right off the bat, we have the announcement that this will be the last version to support DirectX 9. DirectX 11, Vulkan, and OpenGL will continue to be supported, but if you're using a really old GPU that only runs DX9, you may stop receiving updates. The smoke effect in Jak and Daxter has been fixed, and hardware rendering was improved, correcting lens flare effects in games like Midnight Club, Wipeout, Siphon Filter, and others. There were also improvements to texture loading, probably related to texture packs, along with fixes for data reading in Persona 1 and Persona 2, and many other improvements in accuracy and stability. To sum up the rest, improvements to console modules, better loading times, optimizations for Windows sleep functions, better touchscreen controls, now with simultaneous support for both D-input and X-input controllers, debugger improvements, multiplayer fixes, UI upgrades, and several platform-specific bug fixes. It would be amazing if at least half of the Nintendo Switch emulators had changelogs this polished, and not just the classic various improvements were made line. Some people are reporting up to a 15% boost in performance, but I couldn't find any official confirmation, so it's something I still plan to test for myself. If you want to buy original games while saving a lot, check out Instant Gaming, the digital store that sells games for various platforms, such as PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. Get games of all genres with discounts of up to 95%. You'll also find a variety of gift cards and credits for other services. You can pay for your order through your credit card on a website with a 4.7 rating on Trustpilot. You're buying games directly from Instant Gaming, not from other retailers. If you encounter any issues, Instant Gaming offers 24/7 support. And this month, Instant Gaming is offering a great discount on the newly released Monster Hunter Wilds, with up to 51% off, ensuring the lowest historical price for the game. Check out the price comparison with Steam's pricing. What are you waiting for to save? Links in the description. Another highlight this month is the latest updates to NetherSX2 for Android, which brought 2 new versions packed with improvements. These recent versions included updates to the texture dumping system, updated widescreen and no interlacing patches, a Russian translation, and UI enhancements, including larger game covers and tweaks to on-screen control layouts. The Game DB was updated to improve compatibility and enable automatic performance tuning for games. The Controller DB was also updated, allowing new controllers to be recognized without manual configuration. Just don't forget to save your progress on the memory card before updating, as save states may be incompatible between versions. Currently, there are 2 main builds available, one based on version 3668, which performs better on lower-end devices, and another based on 4248, which includes more fixes but requires more powerful hardware. And as I mentioned, save states between these 2 versions are not compatible. Version 4248, for instance, received graphical fixes in several games such as Black, the Ace Combat series, Jak and Daxter, and others that had visual issues. On the other hand, games using the Snowblind engine, like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, Champions, and Justice League Heroes, have major problems on version 3668, so 4248 is recommended in those cases. Oh, and newer texture packs, made in 2024 or later, won't work on NetherSX2. That's because PPSSPP changed the way texture file names are handled, and it automatically renames older files, which breaks compatibility. Some retro achievements were also affected by this, but the team is already working on a fix. Regarding these NetherSX2 updates, I'll be making a dedicated video soon, showing all these improvements with gameplay on different devices, so stay tuned. And lastly, as I've mentioned in previous videos, a group of developers had been working on a native Mario Kart 64 launcher for multiple platforms. That project is finally out, and is called Spaghetti Kart. Installation is simple. You download the executable from GitHub for your platform, save it wherever you want, and you'll need a clean Mario Kart 64 ROM. When you launch the app, it will ask for permission to save the essential O2R files. Then, you select the ROM location, and if it's compatible, it will be automatically unpacked. If it doesn't work, try another ROM. The setup process is quick, considering it's an old game. Once it's done, the game is ready to play. In the settings, you can configure volume, audio API, internal resolution, enable MSA, VSync, texture filters, FPS cap, and much more. You can also remap the controls however you like. In my case, using a DualShock 4, I noticed that vibration still doesn't work properly. Additionally, the project features a universal track editor, still a work in progress. Even running at just 320p, with MSA and 60 FPS unlocked, the visual difference is massive, enough to completely eliminate the need to emulate this game in the future. For now, Spaghetti Kart is available for Windows, Linux, and Nintendo Switch, but this opens the door for possible future versions on Android and even on older consoles like the PlayStation 2, just like what happened with the Super Mario 64 port. Before I talk about the download links, don't forget to leave a like to support the production of videos like this. And if it's your first time here, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next uploads. The download links for all the projects mentioned in the video will be on the Patreon blog. No sign up or payment required. It's completely free and everything is neatly organized. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.